I was really hoping VR would take off a little bit more pre-pandemic, but I think if there's another shutdown, I think you're really going to see the explosion. There's my friend at Nokia, Doug Hohulin, projects 1 billion VR users in the next 10 years.
The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host, Joyce Joya.
Hello, Googleization Nation, and welcome back to another Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show. We've got a great lineup today. We've got the special guest of Joyce and myself. We're going to be doing our second segment today. We're going to be talking about the labor trends, what it's like. Well, Joyce and I have been doing this a long time. So we're going to, Joyce's newsletter, the Herman Trend Alert, just came out, some new updates. And today's show, we're going to be talking about virtual reality. And for those who don't know what virtual reality is, you'll find out. We've got Dr. Angelina Dayton from the Virtual World Society here. And that'll be, she's doing a tremendous amount of work, literally on Cherokee Nation. We're going to be talking about how they're using it for schools. But just imagine, well, don't have to imagine because we weren't around then, but in 1918, when we had a pandemic, and then 100 years later, we just had our pandemic. Think about what it would have been like without Zoom, without technology. Think about just 10 years ago, what it would have been like. We still had 2G around, I think, at that point. Think about the bandwidth, the technology, how we would have, what would have happened. I mean, as bad as education was this year, and as challenging was for some people with work and jobs, and Zoom, and having Zoom fatigue at this point, and everybody's been isolated and quarantined. Just imagine what it would have been without all those technologies, without the Zooms, without Echo, without an internet.
It would have been a nightmare.
Right.
It would have been a nightmare. Imagine having to entertain kids or homeschool kids or connect with business associates just on the telephone when it worked.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's no question that despite our challenges with technology and our complaints about technology, it was a godsend. Now, let's roll that forward a little bit. Let's just talk about, and some of you may not even have any idea, and many of you may not have ever experienced what it was like to be in virtual reality or augmented reality. Now, roll the clock forward just a year or two or three, and we'll get that data, how close we are, to be able to have school truly virtually. And we're going to talk about that because we talk about we went virtual. No, we really didn't go virtual. We went digital. We went online. But it's not the same as being virtual. Virtual is a completely different experience. And if you haven't experienced that, hopefully you will. If you have, then you know a little bit what we're talking about. And hopefully you'll contribute. Hopefully you'll put some comments, some questions on YouTube, Facebook. Let us know what you're thinking. If you've had a good experience in VR or AR, if your business is using it, let us know what you're doing. Because again, we're just on the cusp of something new. We got a couple webinars coming up. One is we had a very successful adaptability quotient webinar just a week ago. We're doing it again, May 20th. And I think Roxy will get the link up there in a little bit. There we go. Thank you, Roxy. We've got that. So if you go up, you can register for 5/20 is May 20th, 1 p.m. We're talking about the adaptability. Also, if you go on my website, if you go to the top of the page, there is a link. I'm also doing another one called Duct Tape Can't Fix Your Effed Up Candidate Experience.
I love it. I love
And
it.
so that's been kind of a very popular one on the SHRM and HR and business circuit, doing that topic on a couple of events. And so we put that up for people who aren't participating in some of those conferences. And not everybody's in HR, not every recruiter. So if you're interested, so that's there as well. And we'll be sure to get that link, but you can get that on the website. Or if you're part of Googlization Nation, which I hope you subscribe to that, googlizationnation.com, you will get weekly updates with these events, podcasts, webinars, newsletters, and other special offers that we hope to be releasing throughout the year.
And special thanks to our partner in Go Move Be More. Yeah. And they will be actually launching the platform next month in May, later in May, like toward the end of the month. All of us are really looking forward to that, with almost 90 coaches who are covering all kinds of different areas: personal growth, health and wellness, professional growth. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, and I know you're a participant, and I know a past guest a couple of weeks ago, Bill Jensen, I just saw, is a coach as well.
Yes.
Hey, we don't want to cut into any more time for Angelina. We want to talk about the virtual world. So we're going to welcome Dr. Angelina Dayton. She is currently the senior researcher at Virtual World Society, and you can certainly connect with her.
I want to know how she ended up as the senior virtual reality research scientist at the Virtual World Society. Can we start with that, Ira?
Go for it. Angelina, welcome.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Joyce and Ira, for having me. I had the opportunity about a year ago to meet the grandfather of VR, Dr. Tom Furness, and I spoke to him about the work that I was doing here in Cherokee Nation and in various other places that I work, but specifically here, where I had the opportunity through the American Indian Resource Center to put over 10,000 students into VR headsets pre-COVID. And we hit it off, and we decided that more research needed to be done on how to promote the large-scale deployment of virtual reality, because its time has come. And so when I had an opportunity to work with him, I said, do you need a senior virtual reality research scientist? And he goes, I didn't know I did, but I think I do. And so I started working with him, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. He's a visionary. So
two questions. First one's personal. How did you end up getting located on Cherokee Nation? It doesn't seem like the most likely spot. I mean, it's not Silicon Valley, at least that I'm aware of for virtual reality. And well, we'll answer that one, then I'll go to the second one.
Okay, so you can do virtual reality anywhere. So the beauty of it is that if you have internet, and actually where I live, they have fiber internet, and it's pretty good most of the time, although I travel, and so there'll be times where I don't even have cell phone service, but there are a number of cows around me that can relay the message however they do. But my family's originally from Arkansas and Oklahoma, and my then husband was from actually Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and our daughter is Cherokee, and so we decided to come so she could go to the Cherokee Language Immersion School, and now she is teaching Cherokee language in VR during the pandemic.
I love it.
That's everything merged together.
Amazing. Because again, I wouldn't, you can take virtual reality anywhere, but you wouldn't think that's a hub that's where Virtual World Society might be.
I would say that my previous appointment was with the American Indian Resource Center, led by a visionary woman named Pam Iron, and she actually purchased headsets pre-pandemic for a large portion of the schools out here. And so if you get to connect with people who are risk takers, courageous, a little crazy, you can do wonderful things almost anywhere.
So before we dive into some of the work that you're doing and how hopefully it will transform the way that we work, and when there's another pandemic or another crisis, that we won't have that Zoom fatigue. Can you explain in layman's terms the difference between digital, online, and virtual? Because I keep saying we're all working virtual, and I guess in one sense we are, but we're struggling because it's a two-dimensional experience. at best?
So there's a lot of different terms. Some people call it distance learning. Some people call it online learning. Some people call it digital learning. And some people, I think, say virtual learning, like you said, Ira, but that's not really what they mean. I consider virtual learning when you're actually entering another world. And so like the class my daughter teaches in Cherokee, they're on a snowflake in an imaginary winter world, and then they explore the words for polar bear and for deer, and they learn in an entirely different world, a world that you create, and a world that in a lot of ways you move through like you move through the real world, where there's what we consider spatial, 3D spatial interaction, where Zoom fatigue is really about, and Joyce and I had spoken about this previously, not really connecting. And so in a virtual world, we hug each other when we see each other for the first time after a long time. We share food, even though we can't eat. One of my really dear friends, Donna McTaggart, has a cooking show, and she teaches people how to cook. We explore places like Antarctica together, where it can be the middle of summer where you are, but you kind of feel cold. So our body has that experience of being together, even though you're not, which counteracts that Zoom fatigue. I was really hoping VR would take off a little bit more pre-pandemic, but I think if there's another shutdown, I think you're really going to see the explosion. There's my friend at Nokia, Doug Hohulin, projects 1 billion VR users in the next 10 years.
And Doug is actually going to be a guest in a few weeks on the show.
He's wonderful. He's wonderful.
Is large-scale deployment of VR into schools really possible? And who's going to pay for that, Angelina?
Yeah, it's actually schools have tech budgets, but unfortunately, there's not the understanding of the best way to utilize that. So sometimes the tech budgets get spent on things that are, unfortunately, the overflow from industry of dead tech. When I go out and give talks at schools, I say Best Buy salesmen are not your friends. They're offloading things that they can't sell to industry anymore, but they can't sell to business anymore. And so I think that the cost is coming down. The battery life is getting longer. The weight is getting lighter. And you're seeing an integration really into things like healthcare industry, oil and gas here in Oklahoma. A lot of different realms are needing the proficiency of young people when they need a qualified workforce. And so it's the time that schools need to pick it up. I know that Chromebooks are awesome, but, and I'm going to say this, it's very controversial. Screens are dead. Wearable technology is where it's at. All of us will look like Tony Stark one day. My kids like to say, I'm Tony Stark if Tony Stark was a mom. And I take that as a compliment. I don't know if it is, but I take it as a compliment. And so it doesn't mean that screens go away, just like we do things digitally now and books have not gone away. It means that the primary medium for most of the training and learning that we're doing over the next decade will be in wearable headsets of some sort. Now, everybody says, Angelina, you're not right, but I want to let people know that there was a time that I was in a conversation like this where I said, people are going to start doing online baking, and everybody said, Angelina, you're crazy. So you can believe or not believe, but it's going to happen either way.
If you can 3D print a chocolate cake and a hamburger, you can absolutely learn virtually, right?
Yes. And our youth I say emerging tech has finally caught up with the creativity and genius of youth. They're ready. When I go into a classroom and they say, well, how do I do this? I say, well, the first thing you need to do is get out of the way. Because what Doug and I call Voomers, he'll probably talk more about it in your podcast, are people who are virtual natives. They're partially digital natives because they have that digital proficiency, but they really live more in a virtual world. They understand that time flows a little bit differently. The work schedules get a little bit different. Relationships are different, and they create the world that they live in. A lot of times we think of education and training as consuming or contributing, but youth create the world that they live in. And you do that, literally create the world that you go experience VR in. So
I know one of the hurdles right now, and again, you're holding up your headset. I got my Oculus Go. I got to upgrade it. because it doesn't update anymore. But it's still cumbersome. I mean, there's, and the investments come way down. But it's still a cumbersome headset to I mean, we're not going to go out and there's some people that get dizzy and nauseous, and there's other effects which have all gotten improved. How close are we to, and maybe this is well, I'm sure you have the answer, but maybe this is a Doug question. How close are we to really having a easier access to the equipment, that it's not so burdensome?
So I like to tell people about kind of how TVs evolved. Remember when we had those huge console TVs and we didn't have remote controls? And some of us, if we wanted to get a UHF channel, we had to go in the back with like a butter knife. And then remember when we used to put contacts?
How about aluminum foil?
I mean, aluminum foil, right? And then with cell phones, and then with computers, they were large mainframes, and then they came down. And then with cell phones, remember when we had to put in our contacts, like if your contact started with the letter C, you had to go A, B, C, and then the C came up. And so what you're going to see is as the need for this type of interaction with our medium increases, then the technology will meet that need. And so what you find right now in like medicine is that you can train cheaper and faster, and you have better retention with XR technologies, be it augmented reality or virtual reality. And so there's a motivation on the part of industry to invest in better ways. And as that motivation increases, then your technology will move along with it, right? Commerce and capitalism drive innovation. Actually, it's gaming, and Reddit, but that doesn't sell. So you say it's actually teenage boys with too much time and money on their hands.
So getting back to medicine, Angelina, what do you see as the major obstacle to adoption of virtual reality in medicine?
They use a lot of virtual reality and augmented reality already. I would say medicine probably has the lowest barriers to entry because they adopt it so quickly, and their innovation is so quick because of the need. And so one of the training things that are happening right now, and Doug might talk about this in Kansas City, is COVID training was happening in VR, and that makes it a lot easier and safer. What you find is in industries like healthcare or things like pipelines, gas and oil, where there's, or even things like welding, two things help drive the innovation. One is you want to reduce risk, and the other one is you want to reduce material costs. So if it costs a lot of money for me to use the materials to learn how to weld, I can begin to learn that skill set because I create all of the materials. If I need more material, I could just create it, right? And if I want to reduce risk, it's a lot less risky to skydive in VR than it is in real life.
So it's all about showing that it's actually more profitable, or we talk about gain from operations when we're talking about healthcare, but it ends up costing less to adopt VR for training than any other means. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
What we have right now is a shortage of people that are experts in how to deploy. And like anytime, remember the .com boom? Everybody got a website, but sometimes people didn't really have a business. And so there's some of us that, and that's what I'm investigating right now. There are some of us that understand what you need to do to design and deploy. And then there's some people who say they do. And if you don't know, right, you're just going to listen and say, that sounds great. And so what we're trying to get is quality deployment, especially in schools. Best Buy salesmen are not your friends, they're salesmen. So that you invest in quality equipment. And more importantly, especially for the Virtual World Society, when you do create the world that you're going to inhabit, you do that in a place of love and wonder. We can learn a lot from the advent of television or the internet about how, when this new media launches, how are we going to get the outcomes we want, like increased productivity, but maybe also not have Zoom fatigue or not have people's whole lives consumed in their employment. Because I'm going to tell you right now, the young people, they're not going to work 40 years at a job if they're not feeling fulfilled, if they don't feel like they're becoming the people they want to be, right?
So I know we talk on a lot of the other shows, especially since this is somewhat about HR. We talk about the employee experience and the candidate experience. This takes it to a completely different level. I mean, we're not even in the same conversation when we're talking about what it would be like to apply virtually, truly virtually, not just remotely, but virtually, or what the employee experience would be like if we were able to do some of those tasks or all the tasks.
Yeah, to actually work in a virtual world.
Right. So go ahead.
I would say with the introduction of any new medium, some things are extended and some things are amputated. So if you look at like television, at first it kind of just looked like theater, but on a screen, but then it evolved. And so in some ways you didn't have the proximity to the actors. And that was kind of something that was amputated, but then other things were extended through the medium. And so when we think about the employee experience, some things will be extended and some things will be amputated. And that doesn't mean things are necessarily good or bad. It just means that you have to consider what are the costs and benefits, because all new medium have it. They say, oh, VR is great. VR is great, and it's not, right? Television is great, and it's not. Reading is great, and it's not. And so you have to examine the things from the experience that you create that are extended and amplify those things, and those things that are amputated, and then minimize the cost of that to the individual. Because at the end, I know we talk about productivity, but you and I and Joy, all of us know that productivity is directly related to my experience. If I'm a happy employee, I work more. And so how do you maximize that in the creation of the work experience in VR?
Angelina, you mentioned like in Kansas City that they were training workers. Was it workers for COVID?
Nurses. They were doing the COVID training to sterilize the hospital places that COVID patients might be going through. So sterilization, sterilization practices. Yes.
What are some other applications that you've seen? Because I know there's a lot in training and manufacturing, or what are in some of the other industries? How are they applying AR or VR?
I mean, you name it. One of my favorite ones is there was a VR experience that you could do to train for Kentucky Fried Chicken, so that you would be safe with the oil, and it was just goofy, right? There's a lot of AR experiences where you project out onto the pipelines to see if you're in danger, if one of the valves or gauges are a little bit off. We train for public speaking in HR. If you get practice in firing somebody, and what's happening in return, you get the experience of. They're doing it in teacher training. So the first time there's a meltdown of a student in a classroom isn't the first time that you're experiencing that. You can go through the experience a couple of times to say, when the kid's on the ground or they're screaming, or there's a case where I feel like I'm in danger, how would I react? So any place where I think it's really useful to not have your first experience of something that could be dangerous or liable to be. The first time you jump out of an airplane, you might want to do it in VR, where where you can afford yourself a level of safety or reflection in process. You're going to find that it's very productive on the other side for the happiness and well-being of your employee, and to reduce costs and liability for your business.
I know 2 years ago, I think it was the I don't think it was at the Cornerstone On Demand conference when they were still doing them live in person. And I think it was Oculus, or it was a company that was working with Oculus. They had a sexual, can't remember, it was sexual harassment or diversity. But you went into the virtual room, you put on your headset, you went into the virtual room, and you sat down with 3 other people, and you observed, you were involved in this conversation, and the conversation was just loaded with microaggressions. And so it basically was, you became uncomfortable, although it wasn't real, but you were also able to be in a safe place, just as you said, where you can see all of this happening, and it gets pointed out in the reaction of how do you deal with it.
Hmm.
And learning, so again, with so much talk about microaggressions and diversity and inclusion in the workplace, great opportunity for it.
Yeah, and you remember those experiences as if they're real. I mean, they are real. They're happening, we're not make believing it. They are real. So your retrieval and of that information later on is more than if you read it in a book, because you feel it. My son-in-law backed out of a parking space that was next to a concrete pillar, and he turned his wheel too soon because he was young, and he hit it. And he says, now whenever I back up, I feel in my meat that the front part of the car hitting the pillar. I will never make that mistake again. And I think in VR, when you have an experience like that, that's why it's so important that you don't put yourself you're careful at what you select as your experiences, because you will remember it, like my son-in-law said, in your meat later on. You don't want to always be with zombies running away. That's not good for you, right? We at the Virtual World Society, we promote wholesome activities and guided experiences through things like diversity training, because you will feel that. You want to feel it. We all want to feel. We want to keep the humanity. I do human computer interaction, and I lean towards the human part of it because it's more fun, right? And so if you have a guided experience with something that makes you feel uncomfortable, and then you can process it, you're really going to feel it in yourself later on, in your gut later on, and you're more likely to see behavioral change.
Angelina, it seems to me that VR experiences are even more memorable in some ways than the experience, the physical experience that we might have, because it has a newness about it, and it has a quality about it that is very engaging, and perhaps more engaging than what we're accustomed to all the time. And I remember, yeah, is that true?
The possibilities are endless. I'm a children's magician by just because it's fun. I picked it up a few years ago, and it helps kids when they're sick, or birthday parties, or in line at Walmart. And the newness of the magic is very much like VR. And
Right.
what I tell people is that if you do a magic trick for a child, they say, oh, do it again, do it again. And if you do it for an adult, sometimes they say things like, how did you do that? Right? They don't really let themselves go. In VR, most adults say, do that. Let's do that again. Let's go flying again. Let's go explore again. That newness doesn't really ever wear off, because there are millions of experiences that you can have. I say you want to always have an adult friend that will say, do it again, do it again. The ones that still have that childhood perspective on things. And being in VR, you meet people who are courageous enough to stand in a space where magic is happening.
Angelina, I'll give you
Oh, I love that.
a great story, and then we unfortunately we got to wrap up. But it's almost 2 years ago. Had my the family was here. Had my mother, who at the time would have been 95. My father-in-law was 93. I just pulled out the Oculus, and we put them on, and wasn't sure again, because were they going to get dizzy or nauseous or disoriented. My mother is in it, and she's moving around, as you do, going 360. We had to watch that she didn't fall over, because she was viewing the cavern, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, where am I? Oh, I'm in India. Oh, where at? And my mother, at least, is a little digitally savvy, that she uses a computer, she emails, and that's about the extent, but at least to that point. But my father-in-law is none of the above. I mean, an advancement is having a push-button phone.
Oh, geez.
I mean, he has no internet. There's no connection. I mean, and so he went up. We couldn't get it away from him. I mean, you talk about, hey, what's next? Or what? Yeah, let's do it again. I mean, he
Do it
was
again. Do it again.
and I recorded him doing it. So if anybody doesn't believe me, so again, this isn't just for young gamers, as you said, adolescent boys. This is this really, I'm really excited about this, and just this conversation. Thought of all these different applications of where it could be used. So we need to absolutely have you back. I know you and I will be having a continuing conversation, but we'd love.
Can I do a plug for anybody who's interested in being? Yeah, whoever's interested in being a part of the Virtual World Society, you can go to virtualworldsociety.org and sign up to be a member. And we have events, community events. And if you check out also, I'm a part of Educators in VR. They have a lot of events also, educatorsinvr.com. And those are two great organizations to get involved with. And I cannot speak about them enough. You'll find somebody else interested in what you're interested in, which is, it's all about community. It's the human part of human computer interaction.
Wow. And those events are held in a virtual world, I would imagine.
Some in Zoom, because we help people, we hold their hand into the transition into the new medium. And then also we really want to encourage people to reflect on what is the world you want to create and be a part of, right? Because that's what it's about.
And what's the best way to, if someone wants to get in touch with you?
They can either go to the virtualworldsociety.org, and my email address is there, angelina.dayton@virtualworldsociety.org, or the vrlady@gmail.com, because that's how I'm known around here. Whenever children see me, they say, the VR lady's here, the VR lady's here. At Walmart, mom, that's the VR lady. So that's become, I'm at thevrlady.com also.
So the VR lady and the Googleization guy meet, right?
Yes.
So that's what I walk in.
Yes.
Oh, the Googleization guy.
Is that what they call you? Yeah.
So, hey, thanks
very much. It was such a
much.
pleasure.
Yeah, no,
Such a
absolutely. This
pleasure.
was fun. As I said, we should change the name of the show. We're just getting started. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
and,
Angelina.
we'll definitely be in touch. I'm excited. I'm so excited about this, and hopefully we'll see you in VR.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
That was fun.
Wow.
Back to our 2D world right here. So
I knew
again,
it would
thank you.
be.
Yeah, thanks. You've been listening to Geeks Geezers Googleization, talking a little bit about VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, quite a few applications, and more excited now than I was just 30 minutes ago. If you haven't had that experience, hopefully you'll go up. Please look up the Virtual World Society. You can learn a little bit about that. If you know anybody who has a headset, when we're out and about, if you're near me, certainly I'd be happy to share it, or we're at a conference. I tend to carry it these days, or I was taking it around just because I was talking about it.
But they're really inexpensive, Ira. They're only like $300.
Yeah, there's no question. They've come down. They used to be quite like everything else, and they're coming down in price even more. So hopefully, maybe one of these days soon, we'll be doing Geeks Geezers Googleization in
virtual world. I love it. I love it.
We are going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back for our second segment. And today, it's Joyce and I. We're going to be talking about the future of jobs and what some of the job trends are, and some of the things that have happened over that, and certainly
the world of hurt that some of our clients and employers are finding themselves in with so many openings. Yeah, we're going to talk about that and what to do about it, of course.
So right now we're going to hear from our sponsors Ngomu and Success Performance Solutions. So please stay tuned.
Imagine growing great employees and advancing emerging leaders for less than $1 a day. The Ngomu app will support your employees in a myriad of ways, from career and personal development to health and wellness. No need to schedule and hold trainings. Just have them access over 90 coaches for live virtual group and one-on-one coaching for whatever topic they need or want to work on. Anytime, anywhere. Learn more at ngomu.com today.
For many people, the bridge to the new normal is too far, too difficult, too scary. Waiting to get back to normal becomes a way of life, filled with fear and despair. But wait, why are those people who dare to travel to the new normal celebrating? Opportunity and growth? How can you get a piece of the action? The bridge between the past and the future, the status quo and the new normal is adaptability. You have a choice. Which side of the future do you want to land on? Will it be coping and surviving or growing and thriving? Adaptability quotient is the new competitive edge.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, Googlization Nation, and welcome back to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, the second part of our show today. And we are going to be talking about what Joyce and I have been talking about for years. One is, Joyce, you called it the impending crisis.
Yes.
Almost 20 years ago, too many jobs, too few people.
Wrote a book about it, yes.
I did that. And then the following year, I was talking about it, but then the following year, my book came out. That was 2003 for you, 2004 for me, was The Perfect Labor Storm. Mm-hmm. And guess what? We're living in a perfect labor storm and having an impending crisis 20 years later. So before we dive into it, your newsletter just came out, which is the Herman Trend Alert. Just came out today. For anybody who's interested, I'd suggest going up and subscribing to that because you talked about taking care of your talent or else. We've been talking about that the last few weeks with a lot of people, and virtual reality, maybe that'll be a way to do it. But in doing some of my research, I've been writing about this. You might have seen it posted on LinkedIn. A lot of reports coming out of how difficult it is. Despite the pandemic, despite 6% unemployment rate, and prior to that, higher, how companies are really struggling to fill positions. But I got to read this. So McKinsey, I pulled some of these stats from McKinsey's report. They raised the they raised the estimate of how many workers would need to change occupations by 2025 by 28%. Since the pandemic. And again, we talked about it accelerating that change. On average, companies estimate that 40% of their workers will require reskilling of 6 months or less. So not huge investments. They don't have to go back to college for 4 years and get a degree, but 40% of workers will need to require reskilling. 94% of business leaders report that they expect employees to pick up those new skills, which is a whole other conversation. And then the share of core skills, and this is important. We've been talking about this a long time, about what the life cycle of a skill was, and it keeps crushing down, or the half-life of a skill. The share of core skills that will change in the next 5 years is 40%, and 50% of all employees will need reskilling of some form or fashion. We talked about this 20 years ago.
Yeah, and you know, the Deloitte study even was more shocking because it said that only 16% of our employees have the skills and abilities that they will need moving into the future, which means that it's going to be full employment for contract trainers and anyone who does training and development if companies are smart enough to understand the world of hurt that they're heading into. And, you know, the truth is that employers can't operate until everything gets automated, and God knows when that's going to be, without people. We need people to serve our customers and make the products and provide the services. And right now, we have 15 million job openings. And that was a month ago, so it's probably even more. 15 million openings that are not filled, according to ZipRecruiter's latest study. 15 million. Now, when I wrote the book, Impending Crisis, Too Many Jobs, Too Few People, we looked at what the Bureau of Labor Statistics said. And we forecasted out that in the future, by 2010, that we would have a shortfall of 10 million people to fill those positions. This is 15 million. This is like 50% more than that. I mean, that's a lot of openings. And the challenge is why? Why aren't people going back to work? Well, it's childcare. And it's fear of bringing infection home. And it's true that the vaccination movement is going to help if enough people get vaccinated. But it's also the fact that there are a lot of people, Ira, who are just discouraged. They lost their jobs in like the beginning of the year for 2 months or 3 months. They worked really hard to try to find new jobs. And then they became disenchanted with the whole process. And now we need them and we want them back yesterday. And they're saying, well, I've got this stimulus check and I can still get by. And sadly, many of my clients who are frontline, who hire frontline people, who low-skilled people, are saying that people don't want to come back to work because they don't have to. And that's really disturbing to me. So there are some answers, Ira, that you and I can talk about for employers. And one of them, of course, is to make sure that you have the right person in the right job. And that you want to do using assessments, right?
Oh, absolutely. But I'll even go beyond that. And thank you for the plug. But it absolutely is making sure you have it right. But I think there needs to be an assessment of the company as well.
Yes.
I talk. Everybody's heard me talk a lot about candidate experience, and as you said, my top, the titles of my keynote, is either your candidate experience is all effed up, which is FCDD, by the way, which is frustration, confusing, disappointing, and distraction, or duct tape can't fix your effed up, your FCDD'd up experience. But it's true. Companies. Let's start with this. Companies want people to come back. Most of them have the same, the PG-rated show, crappy candidate applications processes. They're up again, posting a job description that doesn't tell anything. It doesn't look anything different than anybody else because it's probably been copy and pasted from either their attorney or from the SHRM site. Somebody copy and pasted a job description.
Ouch.
What people want to know is, what's it like to work for the company? Who's my boss going to be? Will I have opportunities to learn? If I come back, what if there's another shutdown? Will I be laid off? How will they treat it? Then you go.
How much flexibility will I have?
Now you go into the parental. What's the parental care? What happens to my kids? What happens if they call off school? It's all these things and policies. Some companies, there are really a lot of, I won't say a lot, there are absolutely some companies that people pull examples from. And there's a lot of good people out there that have rewritten the rules, rewrote the policies, and they go, just as I did, it's like, listen, I'm a small business. We didn't have a lot of rules and policies, but wow, we were doing a lot of activities. I was doing a lot of activities that all of a sudden realized I didn't need to do. And it's not like, oh, I can't wait to go back. And as soon as we go back, we have to reinstate all those rules and regulations. But there are companies that are already doing that. And then there are the other companies that are recognizing that they're rewriting the plan on the fly. They don't know how it's going to work. It's fluid. We're living in this perpetual era of perpetual uncertainty. We're not going back to have a finite physical building, because you've heard, we both talked about this and with the guests, is that it will be hybrid at best. And as hybrid, though, we need to create environments where our employees will feel safe to come back. Right. So, but if they're coming back hybrid, it means they have to feel safe on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But then there's other people that may be coming back Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. So how do you manage? How do you create a culture that is half in and half out? Going back to our virtual reality conversation, that's an opportunity, but it's not quite there. And then it's like, okay, how do we actually do that in a virtual society or a virtual world? And that's being built on the fly. So again, there's so much uncertainty. So yes, are the stimulus checks holding some people back? Sure, but then that goes back to if a stimulus check of $200 or $300 a week is preventing somebody from getting a job, then you really got to think about what the wages are. If that amount of money says, "Hey, I'm making more money now than I did when I worked," that's a problem.
Amen, brother.
That
sure.
needs to be looked at. So for the companies that are complaining about that, I mean, offer a living wage and people will come back. If they can make more money than they can off a stimulus check. We've heard this story. You and I have been around long enough. We heard the story of welfare, that people didn't work because of the welfare payments. Give me a break. If what they got on a monthly check and food stamps was more than they could get at work, that's the problem. But we have all these other issues. So there's people not only afraid of COVID, but do I really want to go back? I read, and I don't know if I printed it out. There was an article I just read about toxic bosses. And it goes back to, this is really important. I know we're running out of time here too.
Well, people join companies and leave bosses, right?
Yeah, but not enough. There was a study, and it's like it takes 2 years for people with a toxic boss to actually make the job change, which goes back to the Holmes and Ray scale. For those who aren't familiar with it, it measured the levels of stress. It gave points. And a change of a job is a 36. Doesn't mean anything, 0 to 100. But at 37, of stress in your life, had nothing to do with work, but just stress in your life, was the death of a friend. So the death of a friend has the same stress impact as changing a job. And then you throw in frustration, confusion, disappointment, and distraction into, let's make it as difficult as possible for somebody to apply for a job. And then also let's make it difficult when people are there to even find out how many vacation days do I have left. And you have to make an appointment with HR to figure that out. So there's all these things that fill this FCDD up. And then what nobody considers is how stressful it is for people. So even there's people saying, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate my employer, but it's safe. There's a safety in, I know who my friends are. I know he's a lousy boss, but what if my next boss?
It's the devil you know, right? It's what people are comfortable with.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of reasons. I suggest you, we're obviously going to be talking about this for a long time. I suggest you go up to Herman Trend Alert and be able to download and subscribe and get this week's newsletter to that. There's a whole lot more in there that Joyce had talked about. I'm certainly going to be talking about it for a while. On Friday, we're going to be talking about it at noon with Ed Gordon at the Gordon Report. And the best way to get that link is actually very easy. Go to youtube.com/Ira Wolf. There it is. Thank you, Roxy. If you go up there, it's actually going to be, it's a big green emblem. And you can subscribe, you can set a reminder for it, or you just put it in your calendar. And Friday at noon Eastern time, by the way, Friday noon Eastern time, we're going to be talking about this month's subject is knowledge shock, and a little bit about this. And Ed's got a whole lot of new stats that he's been working on for there.
Ed always has new stats, right?
Oh, he's got great stats, yeah, and he underestimated them too, but he was right. So you can say that. Thank you again. Here again. It's what was my title? The new title of the show. We're just getting started. Yeah, but thank you so much for being part of Googleization Nation. Thank you for being listeners of Geeks Geezers Googleization. Thank you for sharing, putting your comments, being active in the chats, being active on LinkedIn. And Twitter. That's where we primarily do our interaction. You can catch the replays, obviously, on YouTube and Facebook, but also on any of your favorite podcasts. And that list keeps growing. So if you just do a search and podcast for Geeks Geezers Googleization, we will show up.
And thank you to Ngomu.
And thank you to Ngomu and Success Performance Solutions for allowing us to be here. So until next week, don't let the shift hit your plans.